Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today we are talking about a topic that many people have reached out to us and asked us to cover. Unsurprisingly so, because it is, a very big wrestling documentary, like maybe the biggest wrestling documentary, docuseries, whatever you want to call it, but it's a big piece of wrestling media, wrestling content. It's out in the world. It's on a major streaming platform, and it's the talk of the town to some extent. Maybe the talk of the town is already dying down a tad, but for a while there, it was the talk of the town. Of course, I'm talking about the Netflix series Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, I think we had to do it.
Yeah, I think there was an obligation on our part, right? As well, this is our jobs, our unpaid jobs to cover this sort of thing.
Yeah, so we watched some of it. We watched enough of it.
This is a, as you saw from the title of the episode, this is a worth a watch sort of thing, which we've done before for Heels, which we did not end up finishing. So there's your answer. Was Heels worth a watch? No. But, I think we intended to watch all of this at one point, or we batted it around, but schedules got in the way, life got in the way, et cetera, et cetera. But also, I think we're still fresh off the heels of that Vice documentary, which was called The 9 Lives of Vince McMahon. Is that right? Available in our archives?
Accurate. That is accurate.
Yeah, and we covered that, and we batted around doing an emergency episode on that one because we were like, oh my God, what's the smoking gun? What do they have? Like, and they sold it, maybe not intensely, but they certainly were like, you should watch because what are we going to say? And then it was just a clip show of Darkseid, So I think we knew we've gotten burned in the recent past with Vince-related content. And obviously since then, new shit has come to light. Vince is out of the company. Things have changed. But at the same time, 2 episodes into this series, we're both 2 episodes in, it's very much in the same old vein, I would say.
Yeah, I guess the first thing people are going to say when they hear that you say we watched 2 episodes and here's our podcast on it. And they set it up in the first 2 minutes is like, yeah, well, recent events are really unfolding, but this was all filmed before. And it's like, yeah, obviously like the last episode is probably going to have the most, relevant info. Not relevant, that's the wrong word, but like the most
freshest, most damning, maybe, stuff, obviously newest info.
Yeah, or just the most, it's going to really make or break this documentary, right? Because like ultimately, even if this was the world's greatest documentary, like the Tiger King guy is there, Bill Simmons is there. It's like, and on paper, it's like, wow, we really built this thing to be like the world's greatest attempt at like documentary filmmaking. But reality is like, they kind of got lucky that, lucky is the wrong word, but it's just like with the recent headlines of Vince, it's like, oh, this thing kind of changed and became a little bit more prescient and less like, I assume this thing started because it was like a Vince vanity project, right? Because like, why did we do this? Why did we agree to do this before all of these like crazy allegations?
Yeah, I believe what I've read on it is, Vince was like, and he sort of hinted that in the beginning too. He's like, I'm going to give you a window into my life, but not too big a window and not too much truth because I don't want anybody to know. Like, I think he was going to pull back the curtain a tad, but in a very calculated way, Like, I think it was, as he always does, like, they always give you the implication that you're going to get some sort of insight from him, but it's the same, Vince really doesn't say, he doesn't indict himself, he doesn't reveal too much, he doesn't spout out a bunch of stuff. Like, he's very controlled in his presentation. And this, even if he claimed it was going to be no holds barred or whatever, I don't think, like you said, lucky is not the right word, but the timing was fortuitous in the sense that there was actually a smoking gun that did appear on the scene not uncovered by this documentary team, as far as I know. Like, as far as I know, they didn't uncover shit. The Wall Street Journal reported on a whole bunch of hush payments and other stuff that led to Vince eventually getting tossed out of his company with a huge golden parachute. But the presentation is certainly, we're gonna tell you stuff you never heard before, and like you said, maybe episode 8 or whatever has that. Episodes 1 and 2 have a bunch of stuff that is readily available in any wrestling news publication or Wikipedia page or like anywhere you turn. These are stories that have been told before in various mediums over the last 3 decades.
Yeah, I mean, we could have made this thing. Like,
yeah,
it is the sad reality. Like,
could at least like gave the bullet points. Like, all right, here's what you do in episode 1. Here's what you do in episode 2. We could have spaced it out very reasonably for them.
I mean, I guess another thing that I'm just curious about is like, if this is supposed to be a magnum opus, why do we only talk to like 12 people? Like, I understand that there's certain voices in the wrestling.
It's also like, a bunch of stooges. It's his family. So far, it's his family, and it's Bruce Prichard, and it's Tony Atlas is the one guy who seems to be like shooting from the hip a little bit. And then it's, and that's it. It's Hogan. It's a bunch of people who are either on Vince's payroll for now or forever, or like would never say a mean word about him, Right.
But also Terry, your boy Terry, just seemed more interested in just like perpetuating these like stupid wrestling lore about like
the same lies he's been telling for his entire life. Basically, he's doing it again.
Right. I mean, and it's like, what would have been nice is like if Vince corroborated that story by him telling the story from his perspective. Instead, we got like Hogan talking about Andre calling it in the ring. It's like, all right, dude, like
that is we've said this probably 6 times on the show in the course of years and years, but that is the biggest bunch of horse shit in the world. That like, and they take it. The documentary presents that little bit of Hogan saying, "I didn't know if I was going to win or lose until I got in the ring and I won." And the documentary plays it like it's a genuine thing. The presentation is fully like you can almost hear. You might even literally be able to hear the wow from the interviewer. You're like, no, this is not true. This was the 80s. This is not like the Wild West of wrestling. This is WrestleMania 3. There was nothing uncertain about this. This was as scripted as could be.
But I ultimately, with the decisions they made in booking, like I don't know, maybe they did film them 100 interviews, and these are the best, quote unquote, best they have. But when I was working on like for 2020 for 2 hours of TV, we did upwards of 30 interviews, and the cop from this story would get one bite. And we spent the time and the money, not that like, they're so great, but I'm just saying like, there was more booking done for that than a 6-part Netflix documentary. Like, it feels like they wanted to get a cheap version of it. Cause like, why wouldn't you have interviewed like everybody? Like they only interviewed like 12 people.
Yeah.
One of them
they're the only ones like you said. Yeah. Or they don't let them, speak on more than like, a sliver of the thing. Certainly not so far anything incendiary. And I know episode 3 is called The Screw Job. So I was like, all right, this is going to be the worst one. Yeah, probably. Like this one's going to make me scream and rage just because it's going to be the most rehashed, It's going to be the only thing you can say about that is it's going to be Brett and Vince, in 2023 or whatever, telling the story again. With the hindsight, but like, there's no way we're gonna get there's no new information about that. Like the well is dry on so much of this stuff, and yet here we are.
But I will say though, and I think the Screw Job is actually a really good example of what I do think this does well. And like this, I'm starting to really believe that we are not the audience for this. Like, this is a rehashing of wrestling history, or WWE history, I should say, in a very top level way. Like they didn't really belabor any story or anything in particular too much from what I could see. We really glossed over a lot of his childhood. We didn't even get into like Vince doing the Evil Knievel stuff or the Muhammad Ali Inoki fight. Like, so this is to me, this is very top level, but again, I truly believe we're not the audience for this.
We're not. We're definitely not. And you can attest to that more personally, correct?
Yeah, thank you for that setup. Well, so I purposely watched this with my wife, who is not a wrestling fan. She does not give a shit about this, despite the almost 200 episodes we've done on this.
And the marrying you part.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of this that stares her in the face on a somewhat daily basis. Then she does not give a fuck. But she agreed to watch this because it's Netflix, so there's notoriety to it. Like, it's you go on that Netflix like top 10. You go on like the the homepage where it just cycles through the latest shows and stuff and staring you in the face. Like, this is like with up there with like Love Is Blind, and which
Yep.
is like one of the biggest shows on Netflix. And so, this is getting eyeballs. This is getting attention from a massive audience. And I do think there was a lot of choices made with regards to like keeping it very accessible. Vince meant, and Marina did comment a few times like, hey, like, I think Vince is a piece of shit, but like he does a good job of just like really spoon feeding me as as a non-fan. Like, every time he talks about baby faces, he like makes sure he mentions like what that is, and like seeding those things that you and I take for granted all the time. And it allowed her to really digest information and be able to kind of like get a better context of understanding of what it meant to be a wrestling fan in the 80s, and to be a part of this company in the last 40 years.
Yeah, you're right, and I will give them credit for that too from a structural perspective, because we always talk, we've seen versions of this before, and like you said, instead of Vince McMahon seeding that into his interesting, and Vince is a great storyteller obviously, and knows what he's doing when he gets on the mic, whatever the mic may be, but you get like David Shoemaker at the first 10 minutes being like, a baby face is this and a heel is this, and they do, and you get like the primer, like the super take you out of it boring primer from this random baldo, and you're like, what how is this the most interesting way to convey this information? Vince, on the other hand, clearly knows what he's doing, knows the medium, knows the presentation, what it's trying to be, and understands that like his part of his job is to help everyone out, like you said, and meet them halfway and give them info. That is good. Like, I'm glad that your wife Marina's appreciating this, and like I am glad in the sense that this is information is being disseminated out to them, because it is, like I said, we gloss over it so easily because it is the same old stories, but it is, I'm happy that people are getting the sense of like what a weird, carny, dark bullshit industry this is. Like, that's good information they should have if they don't already have it, because it's good background for what's to come, and it's good to know who you're dealing with. Like, this guy is not just some fun-loving promoter making kids smile. That's was a public persona at best.
Yeah, and even like small moments like seeded throughout this, like, again, we take for granted the fact that at WrestleMania 1 there was like, Liberace and Muhammad Ali, and Alice Cooper's at 3, and Aretha Franklin was like did the national anthem, or no,
America the Beautiful.
America the Beautiful, but yeah, he never does the national anthem. Andy Warhol was seen backstage like during
That's a great Andy Warhol clip too, where he seems like he's just like stoned and also having the best time ever.
Right, but even someone who's like, not in the wrestling world, like understands like, oh wait, Andy Warhol was like into this shit at one point. Like, he was like watching this, like giving that sense of like how big culturally this thing was in the 80s. Like, those things did kind of resonate. And then also like every meme I've ever sent in the last like 5 years to my wife, like with the Ultimate Warriors, like, oh, like he's shaking the ropes. Yeah, I saw that. I've seen that 100 times in like dumb memes or like party full gifs, and I'm like, now I understand. I thought that was just a thing wrestlers did. I didn't know that was like his thing. I'm like,
now I get that he was a successor to Hogan and he failed and so they had to call Hogan back.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is all important shit. Kind of gloss over the WrestleMania 4 and 5 Trump Plaza years, but
sure, or the Macho Man in general as a major character or anything like that. But like you said, it's you're very right, and like it is not for us. And we certainly, I think it's why I think we both don't feel the urge, because like a lot of people reached out, said, when are you going to do this, how do you like it, like the feedback I got from friends and people who know we do this show was more than I've gotten for any other wrestling themed thing that has come out in forever. Like, so the people are interested to know what we think, but I think it is because they're, I think if you are that kind of person who doesn't have that wealth of knowledge already, this is fascinating and captivating. And like, it is why we started doing the show 200 episodes ago, is like, these are good stories and we liked hearing them. We liked reading them. We liked watching documentaries about them. Like, it's just, we've just been crushed by them over the course of so many books and so many things. And it just does not have any sort of, hold over me anymore, or I'm not intrigued. And there's just the morsels and the podcasts, like everything is just so sucked dry that I'm glad they found another. They've never done this on a streaming platform with this kind of notoriety and this kind of publicity. But yeah, it still is hard to get up for. It's hard to find something to connect to beyond disdain for hearing the same thing over and over again.
It is impactful though that like, yeah, no, because nobody really reached out when Vice did their Vince McMahon thing. Like, the 9 Lives. It's not like everybody was like, waiting with bated breath for a review of that.
The normies were not like, oh, the Vice Network. Wow, what could this be?
Right. I mean, I don't even know if the same people who reached out to you about the Netflix Vince documentary, Mr. McMahon, even have Vice. You know what I mean? Like, I would guarantee none of those people have TV to access Vice at all.
Probably not.
To, literally go out of the way to see it. So that is the power of like Netflix homepage is like, and it's also like people kind of know what it's about. People maybe have read headlines. Like even if you have like some baseline knowledge of what WrestleMania is, like you're gonna like possibly like check it out. But I think for me too, just going back to the creation of this thing, you have Bill Simmons, who's like an ardent wrestling fan, who's a well-documented wrestling fan. I think he did like the Andre the Giant doc for HBO.
Yeah, which cover available in our archives.
Yeah, but bonus episode, I think 5 years ago. But then they have the Tiger King guy, which I listened to Simmons do an interview about it. He's like, this guy had no bearing on no context of what wrestling really was. And it's like,
so they purposely brought in that guy probably with that sort of idea, right? Like he's going to be learning along with the audience. So
I guess
he'll know what is like shocking to maybe a regular person who's not ensconced in this world.
But is that a good idea? I mean, but I guess my question is like who won? Was that a creative battle that was won out by the Tiger King guy? And because like another thing too is like Tiger King was an extremely different animal than this. Like it's not like they get like.
Was that a pun there?
Sadly, unintended. But they didn't embed themselves into this like seedy underworld of wrestling. All this shit is very public. Like all of these like terrible things that have happened in the history of WWE, WWF, WWF, like, so it's not like you had to really like, ensconce yourself into this world. Like you're like, it's effectively like a news documentary. Like you just pull these like news clips from the last 40 years.
You're very right. Like and I'm sure, if you were to see the raw numbers, and obviously again, we have it's 6 episodes total. Is that right?
There's 6, yeah.
Okay, so we have 4 to go. Let's assume as we get further along, we know we're going to get Rock, we know we're going to get Austin, we know we're going to get Cody, maybe we get Roman. We're obviously going to get a lot more voices. Like, let's assume we see, 15 people prominently. That's probably hours and hours of interviews. Like, I don't doubt that they sat down with 20, 25 people, possibly more, who knows, and talk to them for hours and sifted through a lot of footage. Like, they don't get a gold star for that. That's what you do to do this, But
right.
But like you're saying, these conversations and any information you glean from reading, like they for all we know, they could have read the books that we've read for this show, and they could have had these interviews with these wrestlers where they probably didn't get any more info they could have got from podcast episodes with these wrestlers, and they could have use that to create essentially the same thing, like I've seen nothing yet that is different from clipping an audio from a podcast, clipping an old clip from a 80s show, and information you could glean from a couple Google searches, a couple book reads, some long form articles. Like, I just don't understand. Like you said, I don't get what they've unearthed here that is any different from like the most bare bones research, like you said, you and I could do if this was our full time job. We could churn something like this out, a script out for this in a couple months.
Yeah, it's all written right there. Like,
it's all
one of the
it's
20
basically
Vince
public
books.
information. It's basically it's as accessible as this stuff gets. You know, it's nothing of this is hidden away. These guys are inveterate, you know, gossips and bullshitters. Like, they are just begging to, even the ones we like are entirely full of it and are just waiting to tell you the same stories over and over again. They've made careers after the ring on doing this exact thing.
Right. I mean, like, Joe, I understand you have to get like tight with Joe Exotic to like in order to be able to infiltrate like this information.
But and there's like murder and stuff in that show. Like that show is like a truly unknown situation they're bringing to light, right?
Well, I mean,
I didn't watch Tiger King. This is news. I really know nothing about it. This is news to me.
Well, I mean, the guy fucking just like owned a bunch of tigers and he's a piece of shit. Like, that's kind of it. Like, the end.
It was the ultimate COVID show. It was like, we had nothing to do, so I guess we're all gonna watch Tiger King.
Yeah, but I understand in that aspect, or in that scenario, why you need to embed yourself with these people for like months. Like, Vince said, I want to tell this story. So like, you've already broken like through on like 90% of like what you would want that guy there to produce, I guess. So like, I don't know. Like, I just don't understand like, well, who drove this and why. Not maybe I'm giving Bill Simmons too much credit. Maybe he's just like, I mean,
not the hardest hitting journalist of our era, you know, not exactly going out there and asking the tough questions of anybody ever. So that is probably a false expectation that he would want to, you know, rake some muck, you know, or uncover some hidden realities. He's probably just,
but maybe I'm misremembering the Andre the Giant one, because I feel like it was a lot more interesting.
It's also super posthumous, you know, like he's been dead, and it's like, it is sort of the irony of bringing Vince in and letting Vince sort of, you know, answer his critics and answer these questions. I highly doubt there's anything. Again, maybe when we get to the end, because I know like they make a point of saying, I believe in the first episode, like literally as we were recording one of these sessions, Vince, you know, was basically got the news that the shit was hitting the fan and like it was all coming down. So maybe when we get to that point, we're gonna see Vince genuinely on his heels, not with a prepared answer. But the stuff we're doing right now in the first two episodes is stuff from 1950 to 1987, 1990. And it's like Vince has been, for 30, 40 years, Vince has been honing these, you know, points and these responses like iron, like sharp as knives, you know, like it would be like, there's no way you're going to trip him up on this or get anything new. Like, his whole life is perpetuating these stories over and over again for decades and decades. Like, there's no way this Tiger King guy is going to rip something new ahead of him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this guy has like, you know, almost beat the shit out of like Armageddon and like Bob Costas live on like HBO Sports. Like, this, like, you know, he's not afraid of anyone.
Tiger King guy is probably, you know, as a normie who doesn't know Vince, is probably like, this guy's a carny weirdo. Like, I'm repulsed by him, but also fascinated. You know, like the normal response that like probably Marina had and a lot of like other people had. Like, I don't like this guy. Like, I wouldn't trust him with my anything, but at the same time, I'm compelled by him to like listen to him. You know, something about him is intriguing. Like, I'm sure like that is, you know, that is not the way to, I would say, get to the core of the story, is to approach it from a total outsider perspective. It just seems like it just seems like you're inevitably going to end up where they ended up, which is just a more mainstream telling of the stuff that millions of people already know.
Yeah, and also too, they're kind of not they're taking liberties, but they truly are kind of like trying to create a narrative arc with these episodes where it's like, cliffhanger, will he survive the steroids trial? It's like, yeah, motherfucker, he survived this thing like years ago, like decades ago, like yeah, I understand why they do that, but it's like, we're already talking about like Eric Bischoff stealing Hogan, and he hasn't beaten the steroids trial
Yeah,
yet.
I was
And
just
it's
gonna
like,
say the
what?
timelines are inaccurate there, to say the least. Hogan is, by the time the story trial is over, Hogan's left and then come back and then left again.
I believe that's the case. Like, I don't think the steroids trial went into '94.
I don't think so. I think by the time WCW got Hogan, that was all water under the bridge, and then WWF was just faltering for its own reasons, you know.
Yeah, but of course, like, they're taking the liberties because it's more convenient, that, and they think a bunch of idiot wrestling fans or non-wrestling fans are just gonna like think that this is all happening at the same time, which is fine. But like, it's also like, all right, well, to me, it's a chronological series of events. As someone who's watched this shit a million times, it's not like, so it just reeks as like, oh wow, we're really just stretching these facts and molding them in a different way. Because I know that like this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, like the end.
The steroid trial was decided in July '94, so it did stretch into '94. But again, that's not. You're still muddying the water. Like to include Bischoff at all is pretty inaccurate. Like in '94, WCW was a blip on the radar, you know.
Right. When does it go to WCW? Is that Bash of the Beach '94?
I think so. So I guess around that time.
But did he? Whatever. I mean, now we're debating. Like,
I know regardless of if it's all, it is clearly. It's clearly it didn't have it didn't go da 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 da. You know, it didn't go event leads to event leads to event. Like they're simplifying it for sure. Which is, again, there's no harm in that. Like, I get why they're doing that, but it just it further lends itself to the fact that this is like infotainment. You know, it's not expose. It's not even necessarily educational or informative. Like, it's meant to be fun and a story, which is fine. But I feel like it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to act like it's gonna tear Vince down, and like, we haven't even talked about the elephant in the room, which is that in 3 months Raw is gonna be on Netflix. So, the presentation, if anything, they're not gonna upset their new best friend that they just paid $1 billion to come on their network. You know, like, they're not gonna shit on WWE. They're gonna shit on the old guy who's gone.
Right. That's a good point. I forgot. I keep forgetting that Netflix is going to be the home for it.
And I don't think, and like, obviously this is, I'm sure these things happen. This thing has been in the works for a long time. I'm sure, but I'm sure they just bit their tongue and were like, whatever, like, we're putting out a Vince documentary. It doesn't mean we can't have Raw in 3 months. No one's going to remember or care by then. But at the same time, I think the odds of there being any incendiary were low, once this all, especially in the last couple of months as this all came to light. You're like, I think we fooled ourselves a little bit into saying, like, well, surely there's going to be new ground covered. Like, that was probably just wishful thinking on our part,
Yeah, I just wanted just a different person to tell the same story at the very least. Like, I got the same person telling the same story again. I'm like, cool.
And Meltzer's there, and I appreciate that Meltzer's there to, like, say, actually, they had 87,000 and not 93. Like, I'm glad he's there to fact check the couple things he can fact check. Read a check. Like, he's about as, even though Davis obviously comes under assault every now and then for his inaccurate stories, but in terms of historical record, he's about as, objective as you can get. But at the same time, again, we've heard Vince's side and Meltzer's truth equally as many times, both of them are broken records at this point. Like,
Meltzer's truth that this is equally as flawed, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not anything new. It's the same old man, rich old man telling you his opinion. It's the same not as rich, jacked old man, I guess, telling you his objective journalistic viewpoint. And then Terry's there saying some shit. And then Bruce Prichard's there being the biggest toady in the world, and Stephanie's there dropping some color. Shane's there looking weird. Like, it's just Bischoff's there. Like, it's the irony of doing anything about wrestlers is there's so many first person accounts where you're probably like, Tiger King guy is probably like, oh my God, this is great. Like, literally the 8 most important people are also willing to talk to me. And then you get them in the room and you're like, they're all just fucking lying. Like, they're all just telling their versions of the story. Like, they've like I said, they've been on the record 100 times before. So, like, it's almost like we're here. You can't possibly get anything new from these people because they've already done this in so many. They're just doing it for a bigger platform now, but otherwise it's the same old, like I said.
Yeah, and then Jimmy Hart's there for some
Yeah,
reason.
Jimmy
Which
Hart is
every
there.
time Jimmy Hart got fun anecdotes. Every time Jimmy Hart was shown in this documentary in the first 2 episodes, Marina just had paused and goes, "What the fuck is this?
Who is this man? Who is this little goblin?
Yeah.
Who's here?
What the hell is this guy?" I'm like, I don't even know how to explain what Jimmy Hart is to a non-fan. I'm like, I don't know. He's just the mouth of the South. Is that even his nickname? I don't even remember.
He was the mouth of the South. Yeah, you're right. 100%.
Okay.
Did you see too that Jim Ross has come out now and said, like, I have all the dirt and no one gave me a call, which is also the other most wrestling thing in the world, is to be like, oh, if only you had talked to me, I would have told you everything. I'm certainly not going to say it now to anyone else, but like, I promise I would have done it if they had called me, but too late now. And it's like, what the fuck, Jim Ross? Like,
you know
if you have the dirt, spill it. Why are you not saying anything?
Yeah, dude, it is
fucking
too
liar.
late now because this thing is already done and shipped. Like, your time is up.
Jim Ross, you had a podcast for like years, didn't you? Why didn't you say this on your podcast when you could have made money off of it? Now you're just saying it to like the news, like the Fightful. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Anyway, Walt, I will say now that we're here, what are your thoughts on the Final Four? Are you and Marina going to watch it? Are you excited? Where do you stand going into not even the home stretch, but the middle and then the home stretch?
I think I'm excited to see her watch the rest of this. Like,
is she ready? Is she like, I'll finish it? I'm good to go.
Yeah, she has agreed to continue watching until it gets to a point where she's had enough. But
it's a very good open-ended answer.
The parts she's seen, she hasn't hated. She's taken some value out of it. Not to paraphrase her, she's in the other room, but it seems like it's not a complete waste of time, which I think is a win. Marina, do you have any thoughts on
what? The guy with Dia de los Muertos shirt?
Is that Jimmy Hart? I don't remember who that was wearing that shirt.
So what did you think of it outside of Jimmy Hart specifically?
Well, I think that this documentary about Vince McMahon isn't about Vince McMahon at all. I think it's about the history of WWE, which is interesting to me as someone who doesn't actively enjoy watching wrestling, but it's interesting to learn how wrestling or WWE became a household name, became a national name, and even known internationally. But speaking of that national name, there was a lot of nationalism and patriotism and blatant racism that I thought was interesting, kind of in a negative way, as I was watching the first episode of the docuseries, where all the bad guys or the heels, as I've learned, are, the bad Iranian, the bad Russian, and that's how some of those characters came to be. And so that may be a sign of the times, but started learning a little bit more about the darkness of how wrestling, behind the scenes, how people treated each other, and what that type of person, that wrestler who probably has some aggression he's trying to channel through the sport, may take it out on the ring boys or may take it out on his fellow wrestlers. And so, there's a history of wrestling, which I thought was interesting. But when we did dig into Vince McMahon a bit, and I think Walt just gave me a little bit of inside knowledge about Vince McMahon's life, so not directly related to the docuseries, but apparently Vince McMahon's stepdad abused him. And so now him getting into this business, not just to impress his, actual biological dad, but also to kind of channel and process the trauma of being abused by watching other people get abused is a very plausible reason for getting into this business. So, that kind of crazed look in his eyes when he sees two grown men fighting each other, I think can be attributed to his personal trauma, although they don't really dig into it. Again, it's mostly about the history of wrestling. I think it's interesting to view him in that context and kind of the depravity that he's expressed throughout. I'm sure there's more to be uncovered here. They stated that these interviews were taken before his, sex trafficking was made public or uncovered. But I'm sure there's more that I've yet to learn about both Vince McMahon and the sport of wrestling. So far, it's part of it is kind of like watching a true crime documentary, and part of it is just kind of like watching like a car crash.
And are you excited for the last 4 episodes starting tonight at dinner?
I would say it's one of those things that, I just mentioned a car crash. It's like you kind of can't look away from it. I am interested, being that I am someone who I like biographies. I like documentaries generally. It's interesting that they took the perspective of not just revealing who every character is and kind of giving you that list where you're like, oh, okay, this is like my fact sheet. It's really talking about the evolution of WWE, which again, like as someone who doesn't actively watch wrestling, it's interesting.
There you go.
I think that's
perspective of the layman.
I think it's all very accurate. Like I think it is, and it is like we sort of said, it's a testament to like they probably knew what they were doing, and they probably knew who they were marketing to. And I think she's right. I think, and we touched on this too. Well, like they don't lay everything out in that boring sort of fashion, where it's like, here's all your guys, here's everybody, and they're all going to matter later, but we're going to introduce them to you in the first 10 minutes. Like they sort of hold back on doing that, which I think is good. Because A, you already know Rock, Austin, Hogan; these are relatively household names, and B, like it's just such a slog to watch a documentary that does that, So I'm glad she picked. I think she's right about that. Like it just makes for more entertaining television to not bog people down with those details. And like we said at the top, insert the wrestling lingo and stuff in maybe more of an organic fashion.
And will you be rewatching the first 2 episodes with your wife, Allie, when...
She is mad at me. We were going to watch it together, but she was on a work trip. And so I was like, I got to start because I thought we might do the entire show. And so I told her, I was like, it's for work, like it's for, again, unpaid work.
Or unpaid second job.
It's for unpaid hobby work. So I don't think I'll be watching with her, but I'll probably start 3 with her tomorrow. And she watches a little more than Marina. She's like, well, she'll watch a pay-per-view with me every now and then. So I think she will not be as blown away by some of the details. And hopefully I can catch her up with like, here's a little rundown of them. Here's a sentence on every monster you're seeing on screen so far. And here's a primer. So we'll see.
All right. Well, Car Crash TV.
Yeah. It's I think it's an apt way. I think that's the right approach too. Like as much as we enjoy wrestling and most wrestling, like the current product and certainly various elements of our history, like it was a horrifyingly gross business where people died and got hurt and lives were ruined and Vince and promoters threw their weight around in ways bit large and small. Like I'm glad that she's picking up on all those dark elements and like obviously that's what this is focusing on to a certain extent. But like we said, we sort of gloss over like we've heard about Jimmy Snuka's crimes before, but for her and people like Marina, it's probably like, wow, like this is a laundry list of things that went wrong and awful over the course of a long time. So I'm glad that's all front of mind for her.
It's also super stoked to hear Marina's thoughts on these Montreal Screwjob because
we'll have to get her to come back on, and I'll give you Allie's take too when the time comes about like these other high profile things they're going to cover that are so stupid but are new to them. So
yeah. Exciting times.
Yep. Well, there you go. Awesome Truth fans. You all probably know these stories inside and out. We hope you're enjoying Mr. McMahon. You probably watched it already, but we are going to come back at some point and do a full series recap. But for now, I guess it's worth a watch, Walt, because it's big and it's Netflix, and why not, right?
You got to be a part of the water cooler conversation,
which is probably honestly over. This episode drops very soon, and the cultural conversation may have ceased by then. But
yeah,
we'll catch up anyway, and we'll talk about it because, like we said, it's our job. So, if you want to find more about Vince McMahon, other books, documentaries, countless Vince McMahon stories over the many, many years of Awesome Truth. You can find all of that in our archives, awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can also find them in our old episodes, old and new, everywhere podcasts are delivered. Subscribe, go through our back catalog, the whole thing. You can find countless things we've done in the past and all the episodes to come. So we're available everywhere podcasts are delivered. Walt, good luck with your wife watching Mr. McMahon the next 4 episodes. I hope it's not a slog. I hope it's a treat. Ask her. That's the main thing. When it's all over, be sure to ask her point blank, is it a treat?
I will get the treat meter from her and report back most days.
And we'll report back to you as well, listeners. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, the truth will set you free.